Good evening. Welcome to a late night taping of The Chosen Life. I am your pilot for today, The Chosen Lawyer, and my co-pilot, very good friend of mine, very excited for this episode, Rabbi Shmuel Neft. Rabbi Neft, Shmuel, welcome to The Chosen Life.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You've been quite busy, you've been telling me, traveling recently and being able to make it back to tape the episode, so thank you.
Yeah.
You just got back from Guatemala, you were saying.
Yeah, we were in Guatemala. I, together with a few of my colleagues from North America, we pulled together a group of 25 or so young Jewish professionals, and we took a journey to Central America, which is such a beautiful place in so many different ways. Nature, the vibes in general, the Jewish scene over there is very special. And every single part of it was such a life-changing experience. I'm saying I brought 4 guys from Toronto. All of them came back totally like on a different planet in many different ways. And yeah, it was a great time.
I remember when I was in Panama and I was staying at an all-inclusive out there and then decided to go travel into the city and blown away as far as the infrastructure and everything else. And all of a sudden I stumble onto a deli, a Judaica shop, and I'm saying, wow, we found our way here also.
Yeah, Panama actually is a very fun. I actually learned this very recently. In Panama City, you have 40 kosher restaurants. That's more than Toronto, by the way, which is it's mind blowing. But yes, absolutely, Jews have found themselves in many different places. I've seen them in many different places. I've been in my short almost 26 years.
Yes,
I've seen a lot of different places in a lot of different Jewish communities. Some as big as enough to count on your 2 hands.
Well, we're going to get there. We're going to talk about that journey. But firstly, to introduce the rector and rabbi, did I get that title right, of JRCC Rockford.
That's right.
Over here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. The Jewish Russian Community Center of Ontario.
Right. And
together with your wife, Esther.
That's right. You got it right.
So let's start off. First of all, I'm a very proud Jew, big lover of religion, culture. It's funny because when you say the title of Judaism, it means so many things to so many people. Some think it's religion. Some think it's culture. Some think it's both. Some think it's a language. They don't realize, Hebrew. Do you speak Jewish? No, it's actually no.
There's actually a bunch of different Jewish communities with like a bajillion different dialects depending on where you're from.
Absolutely, and everybody finds their paths. So, talking about your travels in the world and how we originally met each other. We found each other through the community here in Toronto. But turns out that you're not a native Torontonian, not a native Canadian.
Not at all.
You found your way from Pittsburgh.
Originally, yeah, born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, I got my father's side of the family, who, on my father's side, I'm like 4th or 5th generation American. My great-great-grandparents came on the boat, Ellis Island, late 1800s, early 1900s from Eastern Europe. On my mom's side, I'm a fresh immigrant, 2nd generation. My mother is a Soviet immigrant. It came to the United States in 1979. She was 14 years old. And I kind of grew up in the both sides of the American dream. You have the old-time immigrants coming and building, and I'm saying we're privileged that my father's side of the family are both smart business people, and they built big businesses, and that took decades of work. And on the other side, I was be able to appreciate, what it means to be an immigrant and to live with immigration, and I'm sure we'll get to how that plays an active role in my work and in my personal life.
Yes.
That struggle and that need to quickly, relatively, pull yourself up and build yourself. I'm saying it's crazy to think, and it still happens. You mentioned I work in the Jewish Russian Community Center of Ontario, which is a Chabad Jewish outreach organization that deals specifically with Russian-speaking Jews, which means that they're, for the most part, immigrants, at least the parents or grandparents. We actually have like 10 branches around the GTA. It's a huge organization. Thank God we're doing a ton of work. And you see how people, even today, they come they come from lives of relative something to Canada where they have to start from nothing again.
Now your path, it's on the internet, you can't stay hidden anymore. So your path's out there. I did my research. So starting out from Pittsburgh with the Russian background, by finding your way to Jerusalem, Morristown, New Jersey, Brooklyn, New York. You spent time in Kazakhstan and the Ukraine.
Oh, wow.
So you've
really
been.
Did do your research.
I've done my research. I got people for this, and we find everybody eventually.
That's
believe it
right.
or not. So you've done all these world travels. How did it come to be from Pittsburgh to here to here to there to there, and then why Toronto of all places?
You said we only have an hour, right? So back to my childhood. I grew up. We would call the typical American Jew. Parents, members of a large conservative synagogue. We were, there's different classes. There's the never goers, people that never make it to synagogue. You have the twice a year, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur,
The high holidayers.
the high holidayers.
Yes.
You have the odd, let's go to shul today kind of people, and then you have the every weekers. So we, until I was 10 years old, we were the, once in a while we'll go to shul. Went to Hebrew school as a kid. Sunday school and throughout the week, and then we switched to a new synagogue when I was 10 years old. And actually, I remember the social, I guess you can call it now, social pressure. My parents told me, "Look, we're gonna, we're shifting. We're gonna be moving to a different synagogue." And for me, as a 10-year-old kid, who like anybody at that age, and now even more with social media and everything, looking for friendship and looking for attention and whatever, to be picked out of your regular social circle and to be placed in a different one was a very scary thing. And looking back at it, it's very funny, but I was very against it. Really? But it turns out that shift from the conservative synagogue to the local Chabad center changed my life forever. And we were just talking about nothing happens for no reason. I'm saying who would have known? Right? Mm-hmm. So when we were 10 years old, my parents switched me into the Chabad Hebrew school, and from there started our connection with more traditional Judaism. And for the first time in my parents' lives, they had a desire to go to synagogue every week, and we started going to synagogue every week. And I remember that when I started going to synagogue every week, I was wearing a polo shirt and shorts, right? And you and I, being judgmental people, and people I'm saying everyone is judgmental, not to label you, everybody, we all have our prejudices, and I'm sure people looked at me back then and thought, well, what is this kid doing here in a polo and shorts? But let me tell you something. The rabbi, who was still my parents' rabbi until this day, he married my wife and I off, he never said anything. And when you think about that, that's a big deal, because Chabad, what we do is we create a space that is open for everybody. If you're a Jew, you are always welcome in our space, no matter what your background is, no matter what your level of education is. And that openness and that acceptance that we got as a child, and now being more conscientious of my childhood as an adult, I'm realizing how profound of an impact that had on my life, that it got me to this day.
And how old were you when you met this rabbi?
10 years old.
You were 10 years old. Okay.
We started actually in the summer camp, and then from the summer camp we went to Hebrew school, and then from Hebrew school, a few months into Hebrew school, my parents started going to shul every Shabbat until today. Okay, every holiday, everything.
Yes.
I can't say that we didn't become Orthodox. We didn't make this massive switch, although the backlash we got from friends and family. Another thing that I've come to realize, how much bravery it takes for two adults in their 40s to also take themselves out of their social circle, say, you know what, this space that we've been in until now is not for us anymore. There are a bunch of different reasons. And we're going to go to a new space. We were ostracized. I'm saying, for lack of a better word. And I remember it until this day. I lost friends. My parents lost friends. All the people the whole social scene that we were part of collapsed around us, all because we made a simple choice. Now I think it's wrong, and with human beings we have a tendency, I guess, to make cliques and social circles that, when a person decides to make a different choice, we for some reason have this tendency to ostracize them in it.
I think I always use the expression that when somebody reacts to you, And whether it's good or bad, very often they're not reacting to you per se. It's because you're a mirror, and whatever you're doing makes them look in the mirror and reflecting on themselves.
So what you just said is an age-old Hasidic teaching from the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov is the rabbi who founded the Hasidic movement, and that's exactly what he said. He said, when you look and see a flaw in another person, you're seeing a flaw in yourself. And that's a learning experience, by the way. So instead of using that as a way to attack the other person, use it as a way for self-reflection. I caroused through middle and high school. I was heavily involved in an Orthodox youth group called NCSY, National Conference of Synagogue Youth. I became a leader, and it was in that scene where I finally found, for the first time in my life, a social environment that fit me.
And what age would this be roughly?
13, 14.
14, okay.
And then that's where my personal growth started, when I really started becoming interested in Judaism and interested in practice and interested in meeting. And I was, I definitely wasn't the cool kid in school. And a lot of times...
Neither was I, don't worry.
Yeah, and a lot of times that's the story, right? And then you weren't the cool kid in school, and then you found meaning, and yeah, I guess you could say that. And...
But it's funny because I hadn't known this part of you. As long as we've known each other, I knew where you'd come from, but I didn't know the background. I just automatically assume, and that's my own, I guess, prejudice in a way, is thinking you were obviously born into an Orthodox family. You come from a long line of rabbis. So it was a natural progression for you. I just assumed that was your upbringing.
That's definitely the aura I try to give off. I don't always. I thought about opening up about this part of my life on this podcast. It's something I rarely ever do. Good. But I think it's something worthwhile to talk about. And yes, I realized that I don't have many talents in life, but one talent I have is to be like to adapt to the environment. And wherever that place that I would find myself in, whether it was in yeshiva and rabbinical school, or whether it was in my travels in Kazakhstan, where I would be volunteering and helping the local communities, and whether it's in Toronto or New York or whatever, I always somehow find a way to kind of ease into the surroundings, and I think that's a great talent, especially in the work that I'm in.
Yes. Well, we're going to go to a couple of segues. The first segue I'm going to say before we get into location is, when did the light bulb go off in your head? When did you first say to yourself, I think I want to be a rabbi?
Oh, a rabbi came many years later.
Oh.
Many years later. In fact, when I decided that I wanted to be a Chabad rabbi, and by Chabad rabbi, I'll define that, we define that, we call it in our circles as an emissary. It's actually the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the leader of the Chabad movement, and one of the greatest leader in Jewry of the 20th century. So he called the rabbis in his network emissaries, or in Hebrew shluchim. And that's in my opinion, that's a very special, obligation, or a very special career path. And I didn't decide to be a shaliach, an emissary, until I was probably somewhere around 19 or 20 years old.
Still in Pittsburgh at this point?
No. I graduated high school. I actually graduated high school early. Mm-hmm. I couldn't handle it anymore.
I'm with you there.
I went to yeshiva in Israel for a year. Okay. It was a great year in many respects. And then I transitioned to a yeshiva called the Rabbinical College of America in Morristown, New Jersey. Okay. And I would say that's like I think it's like in games and probably like Mario Kart or something. I'm sure I played enough of as a kid with my GameCube. Where you get like a nitro boost that blasts you to ahead of everybody. So those 2 years in yeshiva was my nitro boost as a person. And it wasn't just the yeshiva, by the way, is a rabbinical seminary, rabbinical school. It is an accredited university. It's Rabbinical College of America. The experiences that I had over there, not in and out of school, are what formed me and made me who I am today. I learned from some of the greatest minds. I spent 2 years with some of the greatest friends, people that I'm connected with and very close to. In fact, one of my friends that I met in rabbinical school is the reason I came to Toronto. And then out of yeshiva, I spent 2 summers helping run a Jewish camp for Jewish kids in Ukraine. In fact, one of the years, the campsite that we did camp on the last time I was a counselor is now under Russian occupation, which is pretty crazy.
Yes. Different world now.
Different world. Completely different world.
So many different ways.
And by the way, I'm saying the whole current events hit me very personally. First of all, my mother's family is from Ukraine. My wife is from Ukraine. My in-laws live in my house now because of the war. I have friends all over the country. I have a good friend whose father didn't make it out of the country, unlike a lot of other colleagues of mine, and is now serving his community under full-on Russian occupation, and it's insane. And this is and you're asking me what brought you to want to do this?
Yes.
These kind of people. I had the opportunity to 6 times as an unmarried student travel to Central Asia, to Kazakhstan, famous for the movie Borat. It's not from what I understand, I didn't watch the movie, but from what I understand, it's nothing like it was portrayed. It's a great country. No anti-Semitism. I heard that Borat...
You have seen Borat of any kind of level?
I saw maybe some clips, but I heard that in the movie, Kazakhstan is a very anti-Semitic place.
He's a little bit of a... I'm saying tongue-in-cheek, he's a little bit of a parody. Don't know how exact he is.
I know the idea, and I know Sacha Baron Cohen. I come to learn about it.
Yes.
Kazakhstan is nothing like in Borat.
Yes.
Kazakhstan is a place where I must say, a guy looking like me got a lot of stares,
yes.
but the stares were of a curious type. And many people came up to me, "Oh, you're from Israel?" "No, I'm from America, and actually I speak Russian." "Wow, Orthodox Jews speak Russian?" "Yeah, I can do it." And we were able to break a lot of stigmas amongst the local population. But what made me decide that I want to take this career path is to see the emissaries, the shluchim that live in that country, were people that gave up relatively comfortable lives. Most of them in Israel, most of them from Israel, some Americans, to live in what you and I would call the corner of the world. In any respect, whether you're Jewish or you're not Jewish. Kazakhstan's a great country, don't get me wrong. But for an American and an Israeli to pick up and dedicate their lives to a community on the other side of the world, which, by the way, only in the last 50 years has become more or less of a more modernized civilization. Kazakhs are you could still go to Kazakh villages and find people that, are living lives of 100 years ago.
Sure.
People that wake up, someone who I consider one of my personal, I guess we would call it heroes.
Yes.
Is a rabbi in Kazakhstan who once a week gets up in the morning, 4:00, drives outside of the city to a dairy farm, and milks cows so that his family, and not just his family, the community can have kosher milk, because that's the only way you can get kosher milk in Kazakhstan. This guy, a couple times a week, heads to a different farm where he slaughters animals. He slaughters sheep. He slaughters cows. I'm sorry, vegetarians and vegans, but that's the only way to get kosher meat into Kazakhstan. And when I saw this mode of living where you live solely for the sake of other people, that was enough. I was all aspirations of business, whatever, out the window.
So Shmuel, spending this time in so many places in the world, still, why Canada? Why Toronto? You could have ended up in Kazakhstan. You could have stayed in Jerusalem. You could have stayed in New Jersey.
Well, so my wife and I got married, and we decided that we do want to dedicate our lives to serving a Jewish community wherever that is. Automatically, Kazakhstan was unfortunately off of the list. My wife said, "There's no way you're going to get me to live there." And it's an interesting story. I'm saying, ultimately, we had different options. One option that I actually explored is, like I told you, my friend's father who's living in a Russian occupation, a city called Kherson, which is the only major city that the Russians have been able to actually occupy since the war started. We were looking into moving there, and no offense to my colleague who I adore with all of my heart, but we're very thankful that we're not there. We looked at other options in Ukraine, and it actually came down to 2 options. It was Toronto or Moscow. But I was telling you how things happen for a reason. And looking back at that story, it's like I'm thinking...
And what year would this be roughly?
To 2018. My wife and I got married fall 2017. I first came to visit Toronto summer 2018 to see what's happening. And you just see how it's like a movie. It's like everything fell right into place. And you're like, this cannot be by accident.
If you think about what has transpired in the world over the last 4 years, between pandemic, between wars, many would say you made the right bet on this one.
You know what? I find that wherever the person's supposed to be, that's where you're supposed to be. And we were supposed to be in Toronto. It was so clear. It was so clear. You know, and if you ask me, my dream. Sorry, Mom. My mom didn't like this part. That my dream was to live on that side of the world. I became so obsessed, so in love, and like I said, I adapted. I talked to people on with local slang. I paid off police officers. I did the whole deal. I've been there and back a few times. And my dream was to move to that part of the world, and my wife obviously wanted to be close to her mother, and that was a very tough period in our married life where we had to decide, okay, where is our future going to be? Yes. And I told my wife, I said, we have to think about ourselves, and we have to think about where does it make the most sense. And it just, like dominoes, each option fell out of place until the only option standing was Toronto. And obviously that's the hand of God working. I'll tell you a crazy story. The way it works is, in Chabad, there's 5,000 emissaries across the world. Some of those emissaries are old timers that were sent out from headquarters in New York, but ever since the 80s, most emissaries are hired by whoever's on scene over there. And we do have a headquarters in New York, in 770 Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn, but it's more of a federalized kind of system where it's decided on the ground. So the way the way we do it, and I have many friends now friends and classmates live all over the world. We do our own research. We look for opportunities. We reach out to the people that need to be reached out to, and that's what I did. I reached out to anybody I could. I told my wife. My wife was very against moving to Toronto. It was very hard for her. She, like I said, immigrated to New York when we got married, and she was already far away from home. And we kind of had an understanding that, like I said, I wanted to go back to that part of the world, and so it was definitely a hard thing to do. And I reached out to the head of the Jewish community of Moscow, saying, "Look, we're a young couple. We speak Russian, which is not something that comes very often in the Chabad world. So it's a very niche skill, and we want to go. We're interested in going to Moscow." And he was very open to it, and he said, "I want to talk to you. I'm coming to New York in a few weeks. Why don't we meet in New York?" Great. I was waiting for that moment. And Thursday, he came in probably Thursday, I think. Thursday, Friday, obviously Shabbat, we didn't have our phones. Saturday night, Sunday, radio silence. And I was working then in school, and I was sitting in my office Sunday morning and during work hours, and the guy's like, "Okay, come to a different place, 45 minutes away. I'm going to be there in like an hour. Can you meet me there?" I'm sorry, I don't have a job. I mean, I do have a job. I can't just run away. And then we agreed that we're going to speak later, and then we never spoke, and then that option fell out of thing, and then we ended up moving to Toronto. We have a yearly conference of all the Chabad rabbis in the world. I was by dinner on one of the nights, I found an open seat with a friend of mine. It was next to the director of...
Where was this dinner at?
In New York. New York City.
Okay. It's always in New York?
It's always in New York. Yes. The International Conference of Chabad Rabbis. Massive event. Awesome. One of my highlight of my year. And I sat down to the guy, and I knew who he was. He's the director of the young adult programming in Russia, all of Russia. And I introduced myself, Shmuel Neft, and he said his name, and I'm sitting and eating, and he shows me his phone. He says, "Is this you?" And he shows me a picture of myself, my WhatsApp profile icon. Okay. So I'm like, "Yeah, it is me." He's like, "Did you say you're going to Toronto?" Because we are still living in New York. We'd already signed the papers. We were moving to Toronto. We're doing all the immigration stuff.
Yes.
So I already was able to go to the conference. So I said, "Yeah, we're moving to Toronto." He said, "Are you sure you don't want to rethink that?" I said, "Why?" He says, "Because I'll tell you a funny story." He said, "This guy that's the head of the community, he a few months ago sent me your number and said that this guy reached out to me. He's interested in getting a position in Moscow. I think he's someone that we should put in touch with you. He's something, seems like prime for your program. And for us, the young adults program was what we wanted to do."
Yes.
And this rabbi he says, "Yeah, let me do it. Let me get on it." So the other rabbi, the head of the community, said, "You know what? Wait on it for a little bit. I'm going to talk to him myself."
Yes.
And that conversation never happened. And it's, again, I tell you, it's like a movie. It's like a movie, and you're watching it, and you're like, "This is scripted." It is scripted.
Because if they had that conversation, you're probably in Moscow.
Yeah, you bet. I'd be in Moscow with no Starbucks. No
McDonald's.
McDonald's for us isn't such a big deal. but even like, and I dreamed of being in Moscow, but it's not about what I dreamed. It's about where I had to be in, and that's how we ended up in Toronto.
So that being said, it's one thing the direction you find in from a geographical standpoint. It's also a life standpoint. As a professional, I've been with you at the shul, putting on tefillin, and I think it amazes people from the public when you're dealing with a professional, when you're dealing with a rabbi, you get to meet him, spend time with him, that believe it or not, he has a life outside the shul. It blows their minds, I know, but he's not there 24/7. Like the way the teacher is not in the school all the time, the lawyer's not in his or her office. They actually have a personal life. And you are married with children.
Right. And
so as a rabbi, married, first question will be is how did you meet your wife to be?
So it was a connection that was made through mutual friendships in Ukraine. I made a lot of contacts in Ukraine when I was there, and that's how we were introduced, and through other people, and we dated, and we decided that this is a go.
If you're Orthodox or in the Orthodox Jewish community, chances are you're not meeting on Tinder. Usually, no. it's either friends introduction or family meeting. There's usually some sort of community connection.
There's usually a person in between that's facilitating it, and in my opinion, I think that was the greatest thing, because after a few dates,
yes,
we started to realize that 12 hours had gone by in 2 seconds. And this is like a few days after meeting each other. And that's when you kind of realize that, you have that middle person that kind of puts you together based on certain factors about each of you that are similar, and you find that connection. Sometimes I know I have friends that date girls, and it takes them a few tries before they find the right one, and sometimes you find the right one right away.
What was your first reactions to each other? Do you know her reaction? And you'll remember yours, I presume.
I don't know. It's I'm not such a big romantic. I don't know, but it definitely.
But how early on in the courtship would you know at that point? You know what? This is going to be a go. We're going to get married one day.
A few dates in.
Yeah.
And that's the nice thing about the Jewish system is it's very objective. In other words, another plus to having a middle person is you being able to then there's no heartbreak. If it doesn't work out, what usually people do is they tell the matchmaker, and the matchmaker passes the messages on, and everyone splits without. And that's a big nowadays breakups and all these things that people have in their relationships, and I deal with it a lot. I deal with a lot of young people and older people as well. And everyone has their own story. That's a very hard process to go through. So we try to minimize that as much by starting at least off with a more of an objective perspective. Not to simplify it or make it seem more mundane than it is. But it's kind of like a business meeting. First, second date, you're talking about mutual interest. Does it make do we click based on that? And then the chemistry comes as a result. And again, it was crazy. I would pick her up at 2:00 after work, and all of a sudden it'd be 2 a.m. And we walked through the entire city at the, I don't even know what we did, but that's when we realized that, okay, this is it.
And in your position, this is not a 9-to-5 job. You never know when things come up in people's lives that you're part of.
24/7.
24/7.
24/7.
It is a 24/7 job. You also have a growing family, right?
Always have to balance that, yeah.
Right. So, and how do you find your work-life balance? A lot of people listening in, I would think not necessarily our rabbis or even of the Jewish faith, but no matter your faith, no matter your profession, a lot of us have that struggle of understanding, we have our professional obligations and we have those needs at home. How do we balance them? So how do you find your balance?
You know what? First of all, one thing that people think about rabbis, I wanted to make it clear to everyone who's watching or listening.
Please.
Rabbis are humans. We are. It says what was an age-old Jewish saying that a wise person, some of the wisest people are people that have their own experience. I was listening to a podcast on the way here about, they're talking about, there's a rabbi that was talking that deals with addicts and helps addicts. And he says that those addicts turn into the greatest leaders because of their own experience. So I'm not perfect. Most rabbis you meet are not perfect, but I'm not going to speak for anybody else. I am not perfect. It's an absolute struggle like anybody else. And I'm still finding it, and it depends sometimes it depends on the season, sometimes it depends on the mood of the kids, what you have to do to kind of create that balance. I thank God that my wife is somewhat demanding in the fact that she says, okay, you got to come home. There's got to be a time for you to come home and spend time with your kids, and the earlier the better. My kids are all in daycare now.
What are the ages?
My oldest is 3.5. My second is 2.5, and my now youngest is 3 days old.
3 days, and you're here.
Yeah, and I'm here. I told you I wouldn't miss it for the world. Yeah, come on.
We appreciate that.
Like I said, my mother-in-law is living in my house. Everything is good. So it's my wife early on when the kids started going to daycare said, I don't think the kids should be in daycare until 6 o'clock. 5 o'clock, let's pick them up. Let's take them to the park. Let them spend time with them. Let them run out their energy, and then bring them home. And so, pretty much since then, look, I'm here. It's the evening, and I'm here. There are exceptions, and as I said, it is a 24-hour, 24/7 job. And sometimes, you get a call from someone, then they need you to be in a certain place at a certain time, and sometimes immediately. That's the nature of this work. But for the most part, come home at 5 o'clock spend time with the kids, and by 8 o'clock they're in bed. But I get those few hours of quality time, and it develops over. You develop that balance over time. But it's definitely not easy.
Between the needs of the congregation, between family needs, your wife, your kids, in-laws, everything else. How do you find time for Shmuel time? Is there such a thing as Shmuel time anymore?
There is such a thing as Shmuel time, and yes. I'm definitely working on it. I must brag that I recently purchased a stationary bike, and I do 25 minutes a day, most days.
Amazing.
During the Passover season, my ties were hanging on it, but I took it off. I strive to make time to delve into learning. A rabbi has to always be learning, always has to be, have material, has to be able to answer questions and according to Jewish perspective. And by doing that, you have to learn, Jewish books, Jewish texts. And I strive. It doesn't work all the time, but I try to make personal time for learning my own every day. And I do, make time for exercise. And I realized, kind of came up once COVID hit. I started to make time to speak to my closest friend, and at some point it became too much, and we kind of brought it a little back. But in the days where we were both stuck at home, we were he's also a Chabad rabbi in Massachusetts. We were supporting each other, and we support each other every day. My wife and his wife are going to see this and they're going to laugh, but friendship is such an important thing because you're able to guide each other. And that's something that I'm very grateful for, that I have a friend that is able to guide me, and he's grateful that he has an objective, perspective in his life coming from a friend. And we, and that's a lot of personal, in the car, both of us are driving, we call each other up, talk, how's it going? What's going on in this? What's going on, in that, encouragement, questions, and that's definitely Shmuel time.
That being said, knowing as far as, again, with Shmuel time and then all the other time, I put this item to myself as a note, but I laughed when I wrote it, just for people understanding, in a typical day, in a typical week, what does a rabbi schedule look like? Could you walk us through that?
I hate this question.
I know you do, but you still got to answer it.
Oh, man. I don't know.
Do any 2 days look the same? Do any 2 weeks look the same?
Never.
So you must start off at some point, beginning of the week, end of the week, with some sort of game plan agenda of what it's going to look like. How often does that come to fruition?
Honestly, it's hard to do that. I'm saying I can gauge what it's going to look like because I have a lot of administrative work and computer work, and I sit in my office most days and most of the day, doing whatever whatever's in my email. That's what I start. That's what I go through. I'm sure that's what most people do. But there's always there's always something. There's always somewhere that I got to be or something that I got to do. It's 9 to 5 is not just a time frame. It's a nature. Right?
What are the type of events or what kind of circumstances arise that all of a sudden change the course for you? Like, what are the kind of things that can arise out of the blue for you? If you can give us a couple examples.
Sometimes it's good things, and sometimes it's not so good things. In my first couple of months after I moved here, I was visiting Humber River Hospital, watching firsthand how a family was dealing with a son that was brain dead and doctors that wanted to pull the plug, and it was for my first immersive experience where we were advocating for the doctors to allow this person to live and not to as we say pull the plug. That's I guess a very
extreme circumstance.
Extreme.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get a call that something good happened, and obviously something. A lot of times are pre-planned. You got people that are celebrating certain milestones in life or whatever. And sometimes people, a lot of times it's just a phone call. A lot of times it's someone might call, or I'll make a point to call someone else. To kind of like reconnect and talk and how's life, and a lot of times that I've built thank God relationships with people where they feel like they're comfortable in divulging personal information, and there's definitely ups and downs, and sometimes that can totally throw off your day depending what it is, and sometimes it can totally energize you.
I can speak from a personal level as far as when we met and we connected, and as we're talking, I'm tracing through my memory lane, and you're talking about your experiences, and I'm picturing my experiences with you, and being here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, there's no shortage of shuls,
right,
and there's no shortage of rabbis, but the reason why I feel now, I didn't quite know till this moment, but why we connected is because I could speak to you, I could relate to you. You weren't rabbiing at me, you weren't religioning me, Jewing me. We were actually connecting on real levels, talking about all sorts of things, and I felt comfortable. This is a real person, and I felt you could be working any profession. I like this person. I can relate to him. I like to talk to him. And every time something came up in my life, good or bad, and I said, I'd like to speak to you. I'd like to come put on tefillin. I had no idea what's going on in your life. You were always available. No questions asked.
I appreciate that. That's a big compliment.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what we do. That's kind of what we. I don't not to compare with this type of rabbi and that type of rabbi, but I think we as Chabad rabbis, we strive to create, at the very least, a open relationship, or a close relationship, or a comfort level. We want to make everybody comfortable. I used to when I was already studying in New York and before and post wedding. Every Friday, and this is something that Chabad students do all over the world, wherever they're studying. Fridays is a day for outreach, everywhere. This is one of the projects that the Lubavitcher Rebbe instituted. Has
this been around for some time?
This has been around for well over 50 years.
Okay.
The Tefillin campaign, the active push to get Jews to put on Tefillin, started in the days leading up to the Six-Day War. Okay, so we're talking 67, and then it became more mainstream that Fridays was the day where students close their books and they go out. And I would go to the Diamond District, 47th Street in Midtown Manhattan, place that I love with all of my heart. And we used to visit a bunch of different offices, and we visited so many different kinds of people. Men, women, some Israelis, some Russians, some this, some that. And some guys, tefillin every time. We put on tefillin every Friday. I had one guy who refused refused to put on tefillin. Now, when I say refused, I'm saying that with an asterisk because he was very nice about it, and and by the time I left, we were extremely close, and that was a byproduct of the mentality of, okay, every single person has what speaks to them. This guy had his own thing with tefillin. He ended up putting on tefillin with the guys that replaced me that were going to that office, which I was already in Toronto, and it was like a mini holiday because he just wouldn't do it.
How did they do it? They pinned him down at the end, or
they told him, no, they did not pin him down. No, there was a campaign. There's a Chabad rabbi in California. His name is Rabbi Schedule. He suffers from ALS. He's fully paralyzed, and they did a campaign to fill in for Yitzi, because we, as Jews, we believe that when a Jew does a good deed, or we call in Hebrew a mitzvah, it reverberates so powerfully. It's not just your act. It's the world's act. It's like I love the comparison about how, I guess we're not going to go into COVID, but I'm going to use COVID as one person changed the entire world, because one person sneezed on another person and that reverberated through the entire world. When a person does a good deed, that reverberates through the entire world. So the motif of the campaign was as many Jews as possible to build up good energy that's going to give this guy, the healing that he needs. And in Judaism, we really believe in that. And that's something that's very powerful. Every time a man puts on tefillin, every time a woman lights Shabbat candles, every time you help a grandmother walk across the street with her groceries, and you alleviated a human being from struggle, that gives a certain power that reverberates through the entire world. So back to this guy about tefillin. So he refused. But every week he would pour us a shot of whiskey. We would say l'chaim, and he would say, give me an idea from this week's Torah portion. And every week he would listen. Every week he would appreciate it. And when I moved to Toronto, he gave a very generous donation to start off our operations. We became very, very close friends. And that's when I realized that everyone's got that point where you can plug into them. Some people it's this way, the other people it's that way. Some people you're not even going to get with a nice word from the Torah portion. Sometimes the only way you're going to get to a guy is to sit with him and have a beer. That's what I do. It's one of my favorite parts of this job. But ask some of my buddies. Some of the guys that I've become close with over the years in Toronto. We just once in a while we just go out and sit for a beer, and we talk, and we just strike up a relationship, and that is that what you're describing is it kind of alleviates the stigma that comes with being a rabbi, and that's one of the things that one of the biggest struggles is the stigma. People see you and they think they know the whole book. They read the book backwards and forwards. They know everything. They don't even want to talk to you. I know what you want from me. I know what this is all about. I don't go to synagogue. I don't do religion. You know what? Most of the people I know, most of the people that I have a connection with in Toronto, at least in that we serve a certain geographical area, most of those people don't go to synagogue, even once a year. And a lot of those people I can consider some of the closest people. It's not a congregation. It's a community. And it's a community that we build one relationship at a time. And there's still some people after 3 years that we're still only on the beer relation, the beer connection. But we have a connection. We're both Jewish. We both have souls. There is always a way for us to connect.
And it's amazing how we connect with so many people in so many different ways. And some relationships can just grow, some shorten, and that's just how life is.
That's just the way it is.
So now, because there's a mixed bag today. We're covering up a lot of topics.
Like I said, we can do maybe more than an hour, and we'll.
Well, we will have you back, but today we're going to be focusing on different areas as far as having people's understanding, and we covered off as far as family and being a rabbi. I have to know next, geographically wise, for people to understand, because people watching this, a lot of viewers are in the United States. You being a native of America, coming to Canada. Tell us, in your mind, being here now for the time you've been, what is the difference really living in the United States versus Canada?
It's definitely very different.
Any major surprises so far?
Surprises? No, but I refuse wholeheartedly to think in Celsius and kilometers. I can't do it. I just can't.
I can't do Fahrenheit and I can't do miles.
Celsius. It's like so funny. We were, and like everyone says, yeah, the whole world is on one system and the Americans are on a different system. So we were a bunch of Americans in Guatemala, and the tour guide is like, yeah, it's going to be 0 degrees on the mountain we're about to climb. And the whole room goes, 0 degrees? And the 5 of us from Canada were like, guys, 0 degrees is really not that bad. 0 degrees in Fahrenheit is like negative whatever, like 20 or something.
So in 17. Your mind today, the temperature right now when you came over here, what is the temperature for you?
I think, in the 70 degrees.
I don't know what that means.
Right.
It's 15 for me.
Right, exactly. I can't. I don't know why.
But when you're driving then, are you in miles looking at the speedometer or you've accepted the kilometer?
So I've accepted the kilometers thing, but just accepted it. It's very hard. That part is actually quite hard to get used to. And everyone's also confused in Canada. No one knows if they're doing centimeters or inches or whatever. Definitely very different culturally. You could say some good things and some bad things, but I'm not here to bag on Canada or on the United States. I like I said, I'm in the right place. Mm-hmm. Even sometimes if I don't like certain things, it doesn't matter because I'm here. I'm a servant. I'm here to serve a few thousand, a thousand or so, families that live in a certain geographical radius. That is my life. So it doesn't matter where I am. I have to be, and you know what? I'll tell you even more. I actually have an obligation to adapt to cultures. A funny thing.
Yes.
Actually, a very cool thing. Maybe a lot of people don't know. So, the Lubavitcher Rebbe has almost unending amount of teachings. And we use those teachings are our lifeblood, and that's what inspires us. One of his teachings, he said it in a talk that he gave in 1992. He said that a person that goes on emissarial duty has the obligation to use the native customs, utilize them as a way to get closer to people, which translates, if anyone wants to take me to a Maple Leafs game, I'm game. I'm good, but you know what I'm saying.
I know exactly.
Yes. To use, the cultural norms to be able to relate to people. So, I still speak with my adopted New York accent, and I refuse to let go of that. Speaking of, but I've learned how to communicate with people here, and communicating with people here is different than communicating with other people in other places.
I've only known you living here. And the reason I'm saying it is, to me, I didn't know that you had come from the States originally. I assumed originally you were born here and you've always been here from our first conversation, I remember.
Never saw me drive.
But you still drive on the right side of the road, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Aggressive,
No, but it seems like you are a native Canadian. You have adopted it, and it feels like you're thinking as a Canadian. You're thinking as a Torontoan. You've adopted it and you made it your own. Whereas for me, growing up here and living here my own life, you throw me, let's say, in Florida, New York, which I love those places, but if I'm there for another 20, 30 years, all of a sudden, I'm always going to think I'm a Torontonian. I'm a Canadian. Right. I can't turn it off. It's amazing how you've been able to adapt.
It's crazy. You know what? After 3 years of living in Canada, I recently go back to New York during COVID almost never. I go to the States sometimes to visit my parents, and a lot of times I go to New York for different reasons. And when I go back to New York, and I think to myself, like, how did I live here? I lived in New York for a little bit. It's like all of a sudden you go from Toronto, which is, everything's relatively calm, to fast-paced New York, this and that, and everyone's on top of each other, and everything's moving so fast. And driving, when you drive your car in New York, you realize you're in an entirely different world.
It is so stressful. I know when I go to New York, I park my car, I don't see it for a week. I'm walking, I'm cabbing it. I am not touching that car.
So,
yes,
I didn't forget how to drive like a New Yorker, and as they say, when in Rome. I have at it when I go to New York, but my last trip to New York, I drove in for a couple days. I realized that, wow, it's a completely different way of life. It's so fast, it's so rushed, it's so stressful, anxiety, and I really slowed down. So that's interesting. Yeah. Now, when it comes to adapting.
Right. And now at this point, you're a person I think that answered this very well. Being, I would say, very worldly, having lived in different areas, experiencing all sorts of cultures. sitting where we are today now, knowing that you could have ended up in Moscow, you ended up in Canada, your diverse family backgrounds, sitting here today when you reflect, what are you seeing right now is right in the world and what needs improvement? I know it's a very big question. We could break it down a little smaller, but currently where we're sitting today, what do you see is going right overall?
What's going right is that we have to look a little deeper, a little past the headlines, to see that the world is actually a beautiful place and people are actually beautiful, and that there's so much good in the world. And watching news and listening to talk radio, which is something that, by the way, I struggle with. I'll be honest. I love news. I grew up with the news, but I've come to realize that less news I watch, the more I able to open my eyes and see that this world is good and people are good. And yes, there's a lot of craziness and there's a lot of improvement. You look at what happened yesterday in Texas. And the first thing I thought to myself is a project which Chabad has been working on for upwards of 40 years. This is started by the Rebbe himself, and now it's something that's actually being adopted across the United States. It's something called Moment of Silence. Arizona just adopted it, Florida adopted it, and some other states adopted it in different ways. Some people require it, some people suggest it. Moment of Silence is replacement for what we would call prayer. It's something that the Rebbe said should happen and should be done in schools. And since, separation of church and state and everything, so you can't call it prayer times or call a moment of silence, which means you give from day one of education, from when a kid walks into kindergarten for the first time, he has a minute of his day or her day where he or she gets to reflect on themselves, on their lives, and on their Creator. And that time can be used for whatever. But it's a time that's, we explain, the Rebbe said we should explain to the children that this is a time for what is self-reflection, what is a creator and what is a higher power. And then let the child, based on whatever the person's faith is, Jewish and non-Jewish, the world. We're talking about everybody. A time for reflection and for understanding and realizing, good and bad. And look at what happened yesterday, and I haven't been so engrossed in the headlines because I know that it'll overtake me, and I won't be able to stop following it. So I haven't been following the nitty-gritty details. And there's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of energy and pent-up, outrage. The Rebbe was talking about this 40 years ago. He said, you want to change a society from bottom up, you have to start when they're children. Children are malleable. Children are like sponges. They can absorb. If we start teaching our children, not just, school subjects, math, science, and history, and all the rest, but also to introduce in schools where kids spend most of their early lives, education about morals and ethics, about so they're, again, crossing, could be crossing the religion line. So as not, church and state as possible, but still very possible to introduce from early on education about morals. The world will change from bottom up, and things like this won't happen anymore.
I was just thinking in my mind, because I remember reading a study. They were saying that they were talking about daycares and kindergarten and then grade schools, and they're saying when we look at prisons, for example, when we introduce yoga meditation into the prisons, we have calmer people, more rehabilitated. If it can work for the prisoners, why can't we teach that to our children from a young age?
Also a big thing. I'm not going to get political. Control, not gun control. I'm saying It's an apolitical, it's a bipartisan subject matter, and you see in Arizona they implemented it, and in Florida they implemented it, and it can be implemented in different shapes and sizes. But the idea the conversation should not be about what do we do after the fact. Obviously, yes, it hurts. It's terrible. There's outrage, and this is just I'm just a human being. I'm not saying that everything I say is truth, but this is what I feel. This is what, based on what I was taught, we have to go back to ground zero, back to basics. teaching morals and ethics to our children from a very young age, to teach our children, you and me as parents,
yes.
and also and somehow introduce into the schools where children are know from a young age that there are watchful eyes and attentive ears. There is a creator who brought you into this world, who is watching over you, and he loves you and he wants you to do the right thing. And when you have that ingrained in conscious into a child's conscience, then the child will very likely not do bad things, sometimes evil, crazy, horrible things. When you're always, you go into a supermarket. A lot of times, why doesn't someone steal something from a supermarket? Because there's a camera right over the aisle. Someone's watching you, and you're gonna get caught, and that's it. You're gonna get in trouble.
It doesn't stop a lot of people, unfortunately.
People nowadays have got a lot of chutzpah, as we say.
Yes. But even understanding the education part, I'm thinking you're reaching me on a conversation I had with a friend the other day. And let me ask you, what has happened to the world in a sense from a child's point of view? When I was a child growing up, I could be 6, 7, 8. There was never a thought of, I'm going to go ride my bicycle around the neighborhood. Go have fun. We'll see you later. 10 years old, 11 years old. I'm going to be going on the bus with my friends to the movies. Go have fun. See you later. I got to take 2 buses to school. All right. No issues. These things were done back then without thinking. Today, you're not sending your 7-year-old to the park by themselves, no matter where you're living in reality. No. What has happened? Have we changed? Has the world changed? Where do you see that?
I think we could be going backwards, when we could really be going forwards. And the ideas that I'm talking about, and obviously social media and internet have exacerbated all the great things in life. Great with quotations.
Yes. Because those dangers, I think, were always there. In reality, we're seeing them in a different lens. I don't think
they were there. I think there was more of a moral conscience before. But as things, morals and values kind of eroded, I think, and as they continue to erode, we have to be the ones to push for change. We have to be pushing, like I said, we have to start from ground zero. You're not going to change society from top. Yes. The whole idea of prison, right?
Yes.
You're going to send a guy to prison. Likely he's going to end up back in prison because he didn't really change. You didn't change him. You didn't do anything.
They just schooled him more on how not to get caught.
Yeah, you just made him worse.
Yes.
Right? It's like in Norway or something, where prison is like a resort, basically. And you see how people go into prison one thing, and they leave a completely different person, and they don't go back to doing crime because they were worked on from bottom up and not from top down. So we have to have this bottom up perspective on education as a whole, and also when it comes to crime and punishment.
I say tongue in cheek often to people, and I don't mean it, but I say at times when I look around what's going on in our society, in our world, I feel like Noah needs to come out, build an ark, grab 2 of every kind. And I feel like we have to start it over, because what are we doing to our society? What are we doing to each other?
So that's when I say, turn off the headlines, turn off the podcasts, at least the political podcasts, and open up your eyes, and you'll see that the world is really a garden and not a jungle. It's just a matter of perspective, and you can, that's I guess a pattern of human thinking. You can always look at the glass half empty. You can look at it at half full. But the way God looks at the world, I think God looks at the world as half full. Saying we were taught, and this is why are we doing this? Why am I here? I'm here. It's nice to help people. It's nice to dedicate your life to community. But ultimately, what we want to do is we want to bring the Messianic era. We want to bring. As Jews and many other people in the world believe in the coming of the Messiah, and one of the age-old Jewish teachings when it comes to the coming of Messiah is that good remains. Good doesn't expire. Evil expires. So all the evil in the world that's happened all the years, most of it passed its expiration date. But all the good that's been pent up over the years, that's been kind of, let's say, adding up in our bank account of our goodness bank account of the world, and that is our merit to be able to experience a world of redemption. And that's what my life's mission is to introduce person by person, street by street, acts of goodness and kindness. Like I said, when you put on tefillin, when a woman lights Shabbat candles, when a person, Jew or non-Jew, gives charity to a cause that does good. Again, when you help an old lady across the street, all this stuff is bringing that good, positive energy into the world and helping us slowly attain that ultimate goal, which we're very not far away from, of seeing the Messianic redemption, a time where there will be peace in the world. And yes, there are many sources and many opinions that say that the world is going to be completely chaotic, at least on the superficial level, when in the prelude to the coming of the Messiah.
So, question for you: when pushing aside other religions for the moment, because your bread and butter is Judaism.
Bread and butter.
You like that, eh?
Yeah, I love that.
So, looking toward the future of Judaism, it's always going to be as far as the Messiah goes, right? In your book, and that being said, I've heard it on different levels. If we're going to oversimplify it, is there going to be a magical Messiah that's going to come down, or a magical Messianic age, or both? How do you see it?
So it's very simple. There's one main source that tells us what Messiah is going to look like. It's a book authored by the great sage rabbi you may have heard of called the Rambam. The Rambam Maimonides happens to be the only authority in Jewish law that writes out clearly what the Messianic age is going to look like. And there are different sources, prophetic sources, and sources in Talmud that are more obscure. This one is where he brought it into what we call Jewish law, that Messiah is going to be a regular human being. A regular human being that's not really a regular human being, because he lists the talents. He's an extremely smart person, a person that is charismatic enough to bring together all types of people, a person who is able to spiritually take on the forces of evil in the world, not on a literal sense, but in a spiritual sense. And that person is a flesh and blood person.
Is he a chosen one per se? He is the chosen one.
Right. He is the chosen one. And that is what Messiah is.
It's not that he stood up and volunteered for it.
No.
He was.
When Mashiach comes, he's going to get a tap on the shoulder from God. You're good to go. Imagine a paratrooper in a plane. And the guy that's leading the platoon in the plane gives the go ahead, the green light. Messiah jumps out of the plane and saves the world. That's what we're talking about.
So this chosen Messiah gets a tap on the shoulder. So that person essentially brings the Messianic age. It goes hand in hand.
That's right.
You're not going to have the Messianic age without the Messiah.
That's right.
So that being said, if that person knows this, how does everybody else come to know it? How will we know it?
Well, that same source, Maimonides, writes what to look for in the Messiah. And he says there's two different stages of understanding who Mashiach is. There's understanding him at a surface level that we can safely assume that he's Mashiach. He's super smart. Like I said, super charismatic. He is able to fight the spiritual battles that are going in the world, to fight the forces of the not good forces. And then he says, how are we going to know that Mashiach definitely came? Well, he's going to be the one to bring all the Jews back to the land of Israel, where their land, and he's going to be the one to build the Holy Temple back in its place. No politics, no. That's what we're gonna.
That's one thing we can always say, because I've always been told as a HaKohen in my last name that when the Messiah does come, that I'll be going to do holy work at the temple.
That's right. If you're a Kohen, you're the family of priests, and
that's where I'm headed. Apparently,
there's actually an interesting nuance to Jewish law that says that there's an opinion. It's not. We actually don't agree with. They don't actually act upon it, but it's an opinion in Jewish law that Kohens, priests, are not allowed to drink. At least not drink too much, because what if Messiah comes in 5 minutes and you're going to be called up to duty? You got to be sober. You got to be sober as sober gets to be able to do it, to be able to do your job. It's okay. We don't agree with that opinion. in practice, but it's an interesting idea.
I've never heard that one before. And it's funny because I'm not a big lover of alcohol. I've never really been, to be honest. I've had points where my body almost rejects it. So maybe it's the universe telling me.
That's right. It's your inner Kohen.
I need to be ready to go. But now, in all seriousness as well, in this age we've been talking about it, and you brought up the internet, social media, and everything else. It's a very different time today than it was in my childhood, per se. I can say I'm a happy graduate from Camp Lubavitch. I went for many years, loved it. That's where I learned to eat. You know, my mom said I was a very picky eater. I went to Camp Lubavitch. I learned how to eat, the songs, everything else. And I had a great, great time, lots of great field trips.
I'm a Jew and I'm proud?
I loved it. I came.
I'm a Jew and I'm proud, yeah.
It was more that the Mashiach is going to be here next year.
That's right. Am Yisrael, have no fear. Mashiach will be here this year.
We want Mashiach now. We don't want to wait.
That's right.
I remember it.
Jonathan, okay, for the people that are involved in Camp Lubavitch today, you see how many years later that affected your life.
And I sent my oldest son Jeremiah there, and originally he did not want to go, and I said to him, just go for a week or two, see how you love it. Came back, I won my tzitzim, and he loved it as well.
Camp Lubavitch, which is the similar idea to Camp Lubavitch in my childhood, was the gateway for who I am today. I was sent to Chabad Day Camp. That's where it all started.
And I went to Jewish day school as well for grades 1 through 8. So it was coupled. It was almost all year for me. Everybody's got their different levels of education, everything else. But when I was doing this at the time, there was no cell phones. There's no pagers, really. Nobody really has a pager in grade school at that point. You know, you got 12 channels, 15 channels on the television. There's no internet whatsoever. There's very little stuff. You're coming home. You're going to ride your bike. You're going to actually play outside and friends. There's much less influences. And one of the things talking to parents today, and I know from a religious point of view, it's as far as bringing people forward. So as far as when I talk about the future of Judaism as well, bring aside other religions at the moment, it's people believing, people attending. And I feel like we're in an age where more and more people, the population is bigger than it's ever been, with so much less believers. And how do we get people, again, to believe in their faith, any faith?
You know what the key is?
What's that?
Social media and internet. I'm serious. You bring up an interesting point. And I would say that mainstream, what the media would call ultra-Orthodox Judaism, the pictures you see out of ultra-Orthodox communities where they're burning their TVs and breaking their phones. Okay, it's really not that crazy. Yes, there are, every Jewish community, every community, wherever it is, has different levels of observance. We were taught in Chabad that technology is a God-given gift that can be used for good. And that comes from a very profound Hasidic teaching, which teaches that there's certain energies in the world. There's an energy which is inherently good, holy. Your certain your tefillin are a holy item. The Torah, this actual Torah scroll, is a holy item. That is an item of holiness. And then you have the opposite, which is an item of unholiness. Like pork. That's why we don't eat pork, because it has that unholy energy that we're not allowed to consume as Jews. And then you have what we call in Hebrew klipat noga. It's a term used in Hasidic philosophy, which means a sort of middle spiritual energy that can be utilized both ways. You could either use your phone to look at God knows what, or you could use your phone to bring awareness of good. And that's why very interesting historical event, just bringing it back to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, just because so many things around him are so fascinating. When satellite broadcasts became mainstream, we're talking about late 80s, when if you wanted to broadcast by satellite, you had to bring a couple trucks with the big dishes. Oh, yeah. Okay? Chabad was at the forefront of modern technology. As soon as it became available, Chabad was using satellite to broadcast the yearly Hanukkah event out of Chabad headquarters in Crown Heights in Brooklyn, and this was like groundbreaking new technology. Before that, it was phone hookups. And if you ever go to Chabad headquarters, and I'd love to take you there, by the way, and show you around, there's a special room called the WLCC room, which is a room that has a bunch of telephone lines marked with different cities. And Chabad, as soon as they could hook up Paris to New York, they were hooking up making live hookups to the Rebbe's speeches and talks. So people all over the world could tap in to what was going on. Mm-hmm. So they had this event called Hanukkah Live, and it started, I think, 88 or 89, where in front of the Chabad World Headquarters, this ultra-Orthodox massive synagogue that can fit thousands of people, these satellite trucks that are broadcasting this children's Hanukkah event to the entire world. And it was fascinating because then it was like you had on the same TV screen, you had New York, you had Jerusalem, you had Melbourne, Australia, you had Hong Kong, you had Paris, and when the Soviet Union fell, you had Moscow as well. And that was groundbreaking technology. And the Rebbe spoke about it during one of those Hanukkah Live events in 1992 that we were given this gift from God called satellite, or insert the piece of technology. Satellite is now obsolete. Now we have internet. It's a gift from God. It provides us the opportunity to do so many good things. Provides us the opportunity to do so many bad things. That's up to us. That's the beauty of life. We're able to take ordinary, what we would call mundane things, and transform them. So, when I was a rabbinical student, I was completely off of social media. But then I realized when I came to Toronto that social media is the key to enabling us to reach out to people. And if only I could tell you how many people we have struck a relationship with through Instagram, through Facebook, how much good content is out there, how much good content can be put out there. And you can use these mediums to spread the message of goodness and kindness and to bring people into Jewish communal life, which will obviously, and teach them something.
So to reach those people, now you have the mediums, you have the ability, but to that person that says, "I'm born Jewish, I have Jewish parents, but I don't feel the religion has something for me. I don't feel there's a place for me. I feel it's outdated." What message do you send those people to connect?
I'll tell that person, "Let's have a beer. That's my gateway." And I'll show you how Judaism can speak to every single Jew.
Well, if you like beer, you find Shmuel. Good. You better start getting cases on ice there.
I'm sure that in Judaism is all encompassing and brings a perspective into all parts of life, and there is definitely what to get from Judaism for every single person. A lot of times, the person that you're talking about is a person that was never given that appreciation. For their own Judaism, and that's something that's one of the beautiful things about my life in my career, I guess, profession, is that I get to show people that Judaism is such a beautiful thing, and Judaism is able to speak to you no matter who you are, no matter what your background, and no matter how little education you have. There's so many different ways. And there's so many different interesting topics, and there's so much out there. Every single Jew could find something in Judaism. We just have to tap into it.
And the thing I find interesting, is from a Jewish standpoint, whether you're born to it, you come to it, is the look in the world, because there's a lot of hate and prejudice out there. But it's funny because my Judaism is a connection point to people, and very often people that are not Jewish. Because people who have faith that are not Jewish and of different faiths, they feel that Judaism is the foundational point to the world, to different religions, and it's amazing the segue into conversations we have then.
Absolutely. Judaism has what to give to everybody. And although, different from other religions, in Judaism, we don't try to get people to convert. We
actually dissuade it.
We dissuade it, yes. Big time.
Well, it's pushing with one hand and then bring closer when the person shows, but it's a lot of pushing away.
So I've dealt with converts, or some people that thought they wanted to convert.
Yes.
It's got to be genuine, but that's a different subject.
We're going to make a whole different episode just on that.
Oh yeah, big time,
guaranteed, and we will.
we believe in the divine mission of every creation. Judaism, when I say we, I see Judaism teaches us about the divine mission of every creation. And we actually have an obligation as Jews to spread that message as well to our non-Jewish friends and colleagues, and that there is, again, the morals and values, the ethics. This is stuff that Judaism teaches us that we can give to the world that are universal. Don't kill, don't steal. These things that for, thank God for most of us, we kind of automatically are brought up that way. That's, these are inherently Jewish Jewish teachings. They come from the Ten Commandments, and we actually, that maybe you've heard that there's something called the 7 Noahide laws.
I've not.
This is the 10 Commandments, but it's 7 commandments for non-Jewish people.
The TikTok version.
I guess. And these 7 Noahide laws are the gateway and the blueprint for living a fulfilled as well as a moral and ethical life. And that's a message that's universal. Everybody.
But I could tell you, growing up, from my experience, I would say I was at a big disadvantage. I was born here, I was raised here, but going through with an Israeli family and then going through Jewish school, through grade school, I can tell you it was if there was not, and no other religions existed. Like, we knew there was Jews, we live in a Jewish community.
That's the thing about Toronto. Toronto's Jewish community is very
sheltered.
Pretty sheltered.
In some ways. And when I went to a public high school and I'm seeing people of all sorts of ethnicities and cultures and colors and races and different religions, it blew my mind, because here I am 8 years and I felt, I've been going through grade 9, grade 10. I wish we'd gone through more religious studies and talking about the other religions in the world and understanding people. So how are we going to understand them, and then for them to understand us? Right. So how do you find the relationship with other religions, between different congregations as far as people, and how do we blend together in one environment? Because we are all here together.
Yeah, I think when it comes to different religions, these are things that can stand to separate us. I think that a certain moral and ethical code that's universal, I think, is something that can connect us. As long as we spread that message and we share that message with one another, then we can connect with the entire world. It's a good question.
Like, for example, Buddhism is one that I bring up often, and very often people see it as a religion, but other people see it as spirituality, as a lifestyle. And if you take somebody who's Jewish, for example, and blend in as far as meditation, mindfulness, I think these are things that are universal as well. But you take Judaism, Buddhism, and you can make Jubu. Is that now sacrilegious, or is that really somebody who has a foundational of religion but has a choice of lifestyle that is universal?
I think that, and there are many stories to back me up, whatever a person, there are a lot of soul searchers out there.
Yes.
If you're a Jew and you're soul searching and you're looking everywhere else except for your own Judaism, I challenge you to look into yourself and find within Judaism what you're looking for, and you will find it. You will find it. You want meditation? You got it. You want spirituality? You got it. You want meaning? You got it. Everything you're looking for, a Jew would be looking for in Buddhism, you're gonna find in Judaism, but that's what you were born and bred with. It's in you. You'll never you say you'll never be able to run away from the tribe, no matter where you go. A Jew will always remain a Jew. And there are many. I personally know and have heard many stories of people that went the world across, as far as hanging out with gurus in the mountains in India, before they realized that what they were looking for was in themselves the entire time. So Jubu, I think, is unnecessary. I think any Jew that's soul searching, and I think and it's not limited to Jews. Let's say any person who's looking for meaning, you'll be able to find meaning in the moral code of life provided by the Noahide laws if you're a non-Jew. And if you're a Jew, there is more than enough meaning, and you see it all around. I'm saying, you got stories of hippies becoming observant Jews, and big business people becoming observant Jews, and people that had it all or had nothing, all coming to the same place, because, like I said, everyone is able to find their connection point in Judaism. It's there. You just got to dig. Got to be interested. It's funny. We mentioned we were in Guatemala, and Guatemala is a very popular place amongst Israeli backpackers. I don't know if all of your audience know, but in Israel, it's kind of...
I know you're Costa Rica all the time, but not as much about
Well, actually, they're all over the place. Yes. I even saw them once when I was in Kyrgyzstan, which is the real corner of the world. Israeli backpackers hiking the mountains. If for your audience that might not know, so in Israel, there's a draft, and everyone in Israel goes to the army, and after the army, there's like this traditional thing where like all the kids 21 years old go everywhere except for Israel. They just leave and they go basically looking for themselves. And I saw these. We had in Guatemala. We were in the Chabad Center over there, which is a beautiful place. A Shabbat table with over 100 people. Most of them Israeli backpackers that were wherever they were in the world. They knew Friday night. In Chabad and Antigua, Guatemala, they had a warm, yummy, tasty Jewish Shabbat meal. And you see these kids are looking for something. They're looking and they're looking and they're looking and they're looking, and and a lot of times they just have a good time, but they can never find it until they look within. And my colleagues that live in these, tourist destinations where backpackers go, have story after story after story of young Israeli soul searcher coming back to their roots in India, in Thailand, in Guatemala, in Mexico.
I use that all the time, and I always say somebody's going to find themselves in India. They're going to go find themselves in India. That's where you're going to be, yes, but you can't outrun yourself.
Right.
I can tell you that when I adopted yoga, and as far as for exercise and health, but the hardest part I had was the shavasana part, lying there and being alone in my thoughts, because now I'm trapped with me. And during this episode, as we've been taping and talking about it, I'm going to oversimplify this, but I feel like when I don't feel like I have a relationship with God, really, I don't have a relationship with myself. The closer I feel that I have a relationship to God, it's really what God is, a mirror to me, and I feel more comfortable in my own skin. So,
right.
So as far as, whether you believe that He's out there or not out there, ultimately, it always starts with inner. And with the relationship you have with yourself. And the more comfortable yourself, I think the more you can love yourself, and then you can spread more love to others. And I think that's where a lot of people are struggling ultimately, especially in the world that we are in today, is that they're so fast-paced with all the responsibilities, they lose that relationship with themselves ultimately.
Right, and a lot of times they end up going to paths that lead to their soul search leads them to exactly the opposite of a positive experience. Sometimes drug use or something of the like, and you find a lot of these people, it's back to the Rebbe, because everything we learn, everything we learn from the Rebbe gives us perspective. The Jewish world ostracized the hippie movement in the 60s. The organized religion Jewish world said, hippies, if you were a hippie, we're done with you. You're ostracized, excommunicated, and the revolutionary Lubavitcher Rebbe came in and said, well, you guys are missing the ball here, because hippies, these are the soul searchers. These people are looking for meaning and spirituality, and they have not found it. And a lot of times it leads them into doing all the kinds of drugs and all kinds of stuff, but it's coming from a place of searching. They want to find meaning. So you can't ostracize this segment of society because they're doing things that you find are inappropriate. They're doing those things because they're looking for something higher than themselves, and that's why I love the millennial, and you can even say I like the Gen Z generation as well. And we have a special connection with people because I'm a millennial. I'm 20. I'm like in the cusp. I'm 96.
I don't want to tell you what generation I am. We're not going to go there.
Let me tell you something. When I put out a message, who wants to volunteer to give out food packages to needy Jewish families? It's millennials that answer the call. It's millennials that are asking the questions. It's millennials that are showing up, and they want to know. And this is like, in every generation they were missing the ball with this. The more establishment people, they were missing the ball. The youth they want to look for a higher meaning and a connection, and we are the ones that are failing them.
So if that's the case, if we're going to sum up today's episode in that sense, as far as where we've come from, let's look at then where we're going today. You get to send right now a message to Jews, to the world, the future. What message do you want to send to them out today?
I want to send them a message that no matter where you're from, no matter what your background is, Judaism is always accessible. Judaism is user friendly, and no matter what where you've searched, if you give yourself a chance to tap into your own soul, into your own faith, then you'll be able to find, if you dig deep enough, that meaning that you've been searching for. And back to the technology and the resources of the day. As I don't know if you, I wanted to tell you the backstory. You see the sticker over here.
Yes,
please. This is my alter ego.
You've seen it. There you go.
This is my alter ego. I coined this a couple months ago.
Rabbi
NFT.
I love it.
I'm sure most of your listeners know what NFTs are. NFT is a play on my last name. That's why it works so well.
You're not legally changing it, though.
No, I'm not legally changing it, but slowly people are calling me it more and more. What's one of the reasons I thought of this is, like I said before, Rabbi taught us, use what you have, get creative. If NFTs are cool, find a way to connect NFTs to Judaism. Why not? If social media is cool, find a way to connect social media to Judaism. Find a way to connect Bitcoin to Judaism. Find a way to connect baseball to Judaism. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, a great righteous scholar, has stories that their stories, beautiful stories, how he would tell kids analogies from baseball. He used baseball to explain a concept in Judaism. So Judaism can be accessed through many different points. If it's through an Rabbi NFT sticker, so be it. That's why I created this. I created this so that people could know and realize that Judaism embraces the things that exist out there that could be used for good. If NFTs can be used for good, so be it.
But it's funny because when I looked at the sticker, and I loved it, by the way, I love the whole concept of it. It's also very old school. It looks OG from the 70s. So it feels like what's new is actually old again.
It's a bit of it. Yeah, I thought it was kind of like an 80s, 70s, 80s. I don't know. I actually designed this logo myself, I must say.
You've done a great job with
it. Thank you. Whatever it is, if it's clean, if it could be used for good.
And I think for all the listeners listening, whatever is your faith, whatever your culture, wherever you live today, we could take pieces of this from other religions, other cultures. Listening to this, if you're not Jewish, you sure by all means can feel clean living, reaching out, using memes. We all can do this.
Absolutely. God didn't create things for no reason. The fact that a cell phone exists, the fact that the internet exists, the fact that gold and silver exist. There's a Talmudic teaching that gold was created for the Holy Temple. That was why God created gold. Well, turns out that he started to use gold for other things. But everything has its purpose. We have to find the purpose for that thing. We have to find the purpose for this microphone. We have to find the purpose for this laptop, for this can of seltzer, whatever it is. It has a divine purpose. Everyone can utilize it, no matter who you are. And that's how we're going to make this world a better place. And it all starts from the paradigm shift, the changing of perspective. To step back and say, wait, internet isn't inherently bad. Internet is inherently, like in the middle. And if you use it for the right things, it can be a great thing, and it can be a tool to make the world a better place.
I love it. I've told people before, think about how great the society we are in today. I know if it was a bunch of me's and it was only society made up of people with my abilities, we'd all be sitting in caves right now, barely by candlelight. Imagine if somebody put together these microphones, somebody put together your iPhone. It blows my mind. There's higher powers to be able to make this happen.
Absolutely.
Because the amazingness of the human mind and where that all comes from. But these are topics for another day. Absolutely. Rabbi Shmuel Neft, with the baby at home today, coming back from Guatemala and your travels, you took the time for us today. Very much appreciated, my friend. And I appreciate your friendship. And thank you for sharing your stories today.
I appreciate, first of all, I can't believe an hour is already up. You were right.
It's way past the hour, by the way. Just so you know, we've gone over, but that's okay.
I want to say, first of all, I am a avid listener of podcasts. So being on a podcast is like really cool for me. And I'm really psyched that you gave me the opportunity, and I'm also a very satisfied client of the chosen lawyer. So,
I can't confirm or deny that. I don't
you don't
talk
have
about
to.
It, but you can say it, sure.
I can say it loud and clear, and I'm really happy that they had me on. And I hope if someone watches this podcast and learns something, or it somehow changes even a little bit, then it was all worth it. Like I said, the small things can have an enormous impact. Someone that listens to your podcast, this podcast, or any podcast that you make or anyone makes, it could completely change the trajectory of their lives. All from some minuscule, maybe one sentence that you said or I said. So I hope that this recording, it does its job out there in the world. And
I highly encourage the people to hit that subscribe button, notifications to find out this episode, future episodes, and leave the comments. They'll have your contact information, Shmuel. They have mine. Let us know your comments, how you felt about the episode. If you have questions, by this outreach, by creating discussions, we spread the word, and as far as being able to, make better into society.
Absolutely.
Well,
absolutely.
Thank you again for the time. And as we sign off and we say, it's ironic, the chosen lawyer meeting with Rabbi in the chosen life. But until next time, we do the flex and we say, keep living the chosen life.
Keep living the chosen life.